Whenever have a cent, I'll be rich as my head. Hello, with gold dust at my feet, on certain tide you see.
Hello everybody, I'm Pete. In this video we're talking about 4/4, specifically playing in a 4-beat groove in 4/4. Very fun, very exciting. This is why we play the drums, right? So let's get to it. So let's get this show started. With a 4-beat, we're going to distinguish it from a 2-beat by playing all 4 quarter notes on the bass drum. So in 2-beat grooves, we put the bass drum on 1 and 3 and a hi-hat snare drum on 2 and 4 like this. Right? For 4 beats in 4/4 time, we're going to put all 4 quarter notes on the bass drum. It'll sound like this. Okay, that is the main difference between 4-beat and 2-beat. Let's dive into a little bit of bass drum technique, okay? Okay, so when we're playing in 4/4 time, there are a couple different ways in which we can play the bass drum. The first way is what I like to say is the light and fluffy way of doing it. So we have our heel to the ground and our toe isn't coming all the way up, right? We're just coming up just enough to lift the beater from the bass drum head. And we're going to strike it, but not drive the bass drum into, or the beater into the bass drum, like this. Think of this as a way to get a more bass tone rather than a bass drum. So we're getting a nice tone from the bass drum rather than a nice thump from the bass drum, okay? Another way to play the bass drum is I'll lift up my heel and I'll drive my foot down, driving the beater into the bass drum, like this. This way, we're getting a nice thump, all right? This sort of difference is, think of a nice light, airy 4/4, like so. And if you want to drive your bass drum in, or your bass drum beater into the bass drum, think of a more thumpy 4, like such. Really make sure that you pay attention to how the band is playing in 4 and how your bass guitarist is playing in 4. If they're doing a more ba-doom, da-doom, doom, doom, boom, you're gonna play light and fluffy with them. If they're playing doom, 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 you're gonna play nice and thumpy with them, right? So there we go. Let's move on to the next part. Okay, so when we're in 4/4, oftentimes the ride cymbal pattern will be the jazz cymbal pattern. If you don't know that or how to play that, please refer to the Cymbals video that I made earlier. But for this, we're just going to talk about playing the jazz pattern as opposed to playing quarter notes and such, okay? So, diving into the ride pattern with the bass drum and the full kit. Right? Think of the blues, think of a nice rhythm changes in a slower tempo, nice fluffy, airy 4/4. Da-doom, doom. Right? If we get into a nice thumpy, I like to play all quarter notes on my cymbal. and nice, just think nice, dunk, 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 right? So bass drum again, driving in to the bass drum and quarter notes, all right? Here we go. It'll sound like this. Right? A nice thump. Do you hear the difference? Think of the more Sidney Bechet style or the Django style as opposed to a nice blues sort of maybe even bebop style. All right, so let's get into the next part. So for the 2-beat, we talked about the snare drum being on 2 and 4. We also talked press rolls as well, which sound like this. When we start playing in a 4-beat style, that could tend to sound a little too kind of crazy if we just do 2/4 on the whole song. So we like to utilize the 2 and 4 or the snare drum or our left hand to add a little bit of texture depending on the part of the song that we're in. The B section, the solos, the end. We'll use the left hand to change the texture of the sound. I will be making a full video on textural changes and when to transition, so please be on the lookout for that. But for this video, we're going to go over just a couple different ways, okay? The first will be the cross the stick pattern. So if we have our hand on the snare drum and our stick across on the rim, we lift up and keep our hand down and put it down. Right? So that'll sound like this. Right? Sometimes drummers will place that on beat 4 only. Okay? That's a nice way to change up the texture of the sound. The other way in which we can change up texture on the snare drum is to not play it at all. That'll sound like this. Think of your more modern or bebop era drummers. They'll use this left hand for what we call comping. A video on that later. Okay, so this has been a video on 4-beat drumming. I hope this helps you play in 4/4 time with your band. I would encourage you and your rhythm section friends to play in both 2-beat and 4-beat and just get a feel for how each of them sound with each other. Okay, so have fun practicing. Thank you.